I guess the greatest point from this morning's sermon is that we should always be prepared to give an answer when people are calling us to be something that God has not called us to be. Before we get into this afternoon's final, yes? It's pretty good, huh? That's Binky's rendition of me preaching, so I think that's probably close enough. I want to go back to Joseph. I'm teaching in the Old Testament class across the street. We just finished with Joseph, and I told them on Tuesday, that I had been to a men's retreat over the weekend where we talked about Joseph in pretty much in detail. So Kim and Blaine and I went, really enjoyed that. If that comes back around, some of you guys probably want to think about attending one of those with us. We had a lot of discussion about Joseph, and one of the things we talked about was Joseph's ability to say no in the wrong situation and why he said no. If you remember, when his brother sold him into slavery, he is then taken to Egypt and purchased by a guy named Potiphar. Potiphar is a very important man. He is a captain of the guard. He is high up in Pharaoh's entourage. And when Joseph goes to work for him, he comes to realize that Joseph is a guy that can be trusted. So he puts him in charge of all of his household. Potiphar has a wife. Potiphar's wife finds Joseph attractive. Let me read to you. Joseph was well built and handsome. And after a while, his master's wife took notice of Joseph and said, "Come to bed with me." But he refused. "With me in charge," he told her, "my master does not concern himself with anything in the house. Everything he owns, he has entrusted to my care. No one is greater in this house than I am. My master has withheld nothing from me except you, because you are his wife. How then could I do such a wicked thing and sin against God?" And though she spoke to Joseph day after day, he refused to go with her or even to spend time with her. Joseph was a smart man. I had an associate not too many years ago who was so dedicated to making sure his reputation was clean that he would not be alone in a building with a young lady that was not his wife. And so when she would come in, he would go out. He would just make sure that there was distance between them, strictly for the purpose of making sure that his reputation was clean and pure. Most of us guys don't go that far out of our way. Last week I had a conversation in my philosophy class about looking at tests after they're taken. And I said, if you want to come to my office and look at your exam, I'll be happy to get it out and we can go over it, but I'm not going to return your exams to you. Girls, if you would like to come in pairs, I would appreciate that, because my office is not on campus and I'm usually the only person in the building at the time. One of the young ladies was offended by that, took me to task, and so we discussed it and I changed my policy. Now, if they want to talk about their test, I'll meet them in the library on campus. That's nice and public and an easier place for us to meet and to do that. But we live in a society that assumes sexual immorality. We live in a society that even applauds sexual immorality. And so for us guys and for the girls as well, we've got to make sure that everything we do is above reproach. Now in Joseph's case, that still wasn't enough. Potiphar's wife was willing to lie, she was willing to cheat, and she eventually got him thrown into prison. But again, as Joseph says, kind of toward the end of his career, as his brothers and family are moving to Egypt, you meant it for evil, but God meant it for good. So all these things that happened to him along the way, whether it's his brothers selling him into slavery or his slave-owning master's wife getting him in trouble for something he never did, he was always God's man. So notice this, the two reasons he gives her. He's ready to give a reason. Number one, I have been given trust by my employer. My owner trusts me with everything in his house. I'm not going to violate that trust. And number two, I'm God's man. I'm not going to do anything that's going to violate my relationship with God. Even if you're attractive, even if you're desirable, even if you desire me, I'm God's man first. So all of us, if we can keep that in mind, can keep ourselves out of a lot of situations that might otherwise turn ugly on us and keep being God's men and women. If there's some way we can encourage, and we want to, as we sing.